Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for tuning in to our little conference wrap-up for the 4th World Seabird Twitter Conference. We had a lot of really great participation this year and a lot of really great engagement. I just want to share some of the statistics with you. We had 100 presenters from 22 countries in 3 different languages and 16 different sessions. I want to thank Pacific Seabird Group specifically. They sponsored us with a $500 sponsorship, and that took care of the website app and all the registration. The Australasian Seabird Group gave us $100 for a presentation prize. Avian Biology Research gave us £200 and a subscription to the journal as a prize. And the Seabird Group gave us free conference registration for 2018. So all of these prizes will be going out to presenters. We're in the process of judging everyone's presentation. So the next few weeks or so is when you should look out for some sort of notification in that way. I want to share a few other statistics for you. We actually only have some metrics from the last 2 days, and we'll get the 3rd day soon, but there were over 2,500 total tweets with the hashtag WSTC4, which is pretty amazing. 597 people were tweeting. The total audience, so the total number of people that saw these tweets, was over 1 million, and over 3 million people saw this on their Twitter feed. So this is pretty amazing. We're going to tweet the map of where the tweets were coming from around the globe, and I think it's really, really great. One of my favorite statistics about our conference this year is actually we're about 50-50 male and female, which is pretty cool. 51.6% female and 48.4% males tweeting. So that's a pretty equal distribution. I'm really excited about that. Okay, let's get down to our plenary Q&A. So if everyone wants to go ahead and introduce themselves.
I think I'm supposed to go first. Hi, everyone. I am Michelle LaRue. I'm a research ecologist at the University of Minnesota. And the research I do on seabirds has to do with the 2 Antarctic penguins, so Adelie penguins and emperor penguins. And for this plenary session that I tweeted out, I was talking about science communication and emperor penguins, and specifically how I used emperor penguins kind of as a platform to get people interested in, I guess, in Antarctic research, Antarctic ecology, so yeah, that they're kind of my. I use them a lot. I use penguins a lot for science communication. They're very useful.
I'm Alex Bond. I'm the senior curator at Natural History Museum here. My research interests are in conservation. A lot, not just seabirds, plastics in particular, which was the focus of a lot of my plenary, but also heavy metals and invasive species as well.
Okay, I'm quickly going to go last. So I'm Saskia Wisniewski. I am nobody in this session, but I'm just going to moderate. I've been the chair for the last World Seabird Twitter conference, but I'm just going to help out here a bit. I think Laura should introduce herself as well, though.
Oh yeah, good point. I should do that. I'm Laura Bliss. I was the chair this year of the 4th World Seabird Twitter Conference, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Manitoba.
Okay, brilliant. So the reason, the reason why we thought this kind of like session would be a really good idea is because we just wanted to have a look at the conference and see what kind of topics really resonate with all the people that are around. And as you've seen, like the session is all going to be about science communication. So the reason we came up with this is not only because Michelle gave an absolutely amazing plenary about it, Thomas McTurn, who's not here at the moment, who was another plenary speaker, he also kind of like touched a lot on it and how important it actually is for conservation. We also kind of felt that the whole audience for the Twitter conference was kind of like really interested in, first of all, how to be an effective science communicator and how to engage in certain things. So we thought we have like 2 brilliant science communicators here. It's a shame that Thomas can't be here because he's really brilliant as well. But yeah, so like Alex, he has like, I think more than, not that followers are very important, but I think he has more than 5,000 followers on Twitter. So that's quite good. And Michelle, I'm not even talking, it's like, I think it's almost 12,000. So there are a lot of people engaging with what Michelle and Alex are doing on a one-to-one basis, on a day-to-day basis. And for some people that does seem maybe not that important, but it might, well, it actually is. And so I really just want to start off and ask Michelle, why do you think a science communication is so important? If you could just give that to us in a short nutshell before handing over to Alex.
Well, I think science communication is important primarily because I mean, what use is science if other people can't benefit from it, right? So I think being able to communicate what you do and your passion for why you're doing what you do is really important. So to get other people interested and to increase awareness. I think a lot of times, I'm sure we all get this, and I'm sure anyone who's watching will get this too. You'll get the like, oh, I didn't know that, right? And it may be something that we happen to take for granted. And so I think being able to communicate your work and your passion for what you do to people who are other scientists, people who aren't scientists, I think is really critical to advancing conservation and just science in general.
Yeah, I'll echo essentially all of Michelle made, and add that, I mean, it's not just, I mean, Twitter is one fantastic tool reaching a large audience. It reaches one specific traffic, and that's Twitter use. Lots of other avenues for science communication, including Facebook, which audience you want to reach. There's a whole that so it's but yeah, it helps. Really passionate about the work that you're doing. Not every you've got to get that message.
All right. Just to make you aware, Alex, you're quite breaking up a bit, so I don't know if you can do anything about it. If you can't, don't worry. We try to go through like this. Yeah, so that's all really great. Yeah. So the other question that's really important, and that I guess really is important for all the people watching this, is you as major science communicators. What do you think are your major tips and tricks? And I would probably give that to Michelle again as well, so Alex can maybe change laptops.
Yeah, always technology can be a blessing and a curse, right? So some of the tips and tricks. The first thing that comes to my mind, actually, that I think is critical for people who may be kind of skeptical about SciComm and using Twitter and Facebook and speaking to the public and things is, first and foremost, I think the better you get at science communication, the better you do at writing, the better you do at conference presentations. And so even from the perspective, if you happen to be skeptical about how these kinds of skills can be useful for you in your, kind of in your scientific realm, it can be really, really helpful there. And I'm speaking from experience there. I feel like, the ability to say what you want to say and also, be relatively interesting, I think, makes science conferences a lot better as well. So there's that. But I would say some of the tips and tricks, probably the one thing that I tell people to do most is practice. So my personal preference, I guess, for doing science communication is less writing and more speaking. So I do a lot of speaking engagements, podcasts and radio interviews and things like that. And so there is no like shortcut to getting good at it. You have to just practice. And that's probably not something everyone wants to hear, but it's true. You just have to practice, and you have to try really hard. Make sure to get feedback from people. And the other thing that I want to point out too is to kind of try things out a little bit. So if you aren't really sure how something is going to land, try it out and kind of do a little bit of trial and error. I will say when I first started using Twitter in 2014, randomly today, I was like looking back at some of my old tweets, and I was like, oh my God, they're so bad. So you can't expect to be good at it right away. And I would argue that probably the people who are very famous and good at it probably think that they still have room for improvement, right? So there's just always room for improvement. Try things out, see how they work, and practice as much as you can.
Right, I'm back. Hopefully I'm not jumping around quite so much. I'm getting the thumbs up from Saskia. Tips and tricks. It's got to be personal. A lot of people use Twitter, a lot of organizations use Twitter as essentially a one-way information delivery system, getting their own message out, but not really engaging with the people behind the message. We're all humans. Every scientific endeavor is fraught with success, failure, emotion, disaster, and triumph at the end of it. And seeing that journey, I think, and understanding the people making that journey, for me, has been the most rewarding. And that's led to sort of the best relationships with other people on Twitter are the ones where they've been tweeting through their field season. I've asked them questions and engaged, and they've written back, and they're sharing videos or telling me about how homesick they are, or they got a parasitic infection, or the weather is rubbish. It's not just it being a one-way sort of verbal trumpet of just the science and the results, but the people and the process behind it.
Okay, they're brilliant answers. Really, really nice. I think Laura wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing from both of you is tell a good story. And one of the tips that I've always heard is if you can't explain it to your grandmother, then you don't know it well enough. And I think that that's something that I really like about this Twitter conference, is that we're communicating with our peers, or connecting with our peers and sharing our research, but we're also connecting with the public. And I think that just 4 tweets makes it so you have to make it very simple. And this could impact people from all kinds of walks of life. So make it interesting and tell a good story. It sounds like that's what you're saying. And I think that's the best tip that I've received.
Yeah, can I add on to that? Is that okay? Yeah. So the one thing, the way I like to think about it, and would love other feedback as well, is rather than thinking about it as explaining it to your grandmother or your mom or whatever, I think about it like translating to a different language. And the reason I think about it that way is because think about all the jargon that can happen in science, right? Like even across scientific disciplines. Like there's been plenty of times where I've been, walked past a physics, talk or something, and I have no idea what they're talking about, right? It's not that I'm necessarily unintelligent. It's just that I don't know what they're talking about, right? So it's like translating from one language to another, to the point where, it's just kind of like plain language where we can all kind of meet in the middle. So I totally agree, like making it relatively simple, making it interesting, and then also connecting with your audience. I think that's another trick or tip that I'd like to just add in is make sure to meet your audience where they are and tell them the thing that they need to know, not necessarily what you think they should know, because that'll make it more interesting and worthwhile for everybody.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I mean, we often use the, explain it to your grandmother scenario. A lot of people have ridiculously smart grandmothers. So it's more about making it accessible to as wide a group as needed. So if you're giving a talk at a seabird conference, everyone pretty much knows what a seabird is and what birds do, and that they lay eggs and that they feed chicks. But if you're giving a talk to a school group or a general science conference, they may not have that level of specialist knowledge, which we sort of take for granted in our own little integrated bubble of seabird science. So it's making the talk to a level that can be understood by the audience you're trying to reach. And I think a great way for doing that, and I think Michelle does this brilliantly, is to make it a personal story. I mean, we all go to amazing places. We do amazing things. I mean, it's a journey. It's a travel narrative. I mean, these are all the successful films. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones. These are all sort of travel narratives of groups going to accomplish some big task. And they're attractive because, there's a goal. There are people involved that are invested in it and the relationships. And when you show that about the science that we all do, and we all have these relationships, then that just makes it much more intriguing and it draws your audience in.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And then it doesn't happen. Well, if anyone would be doing that, every scientist, then we don't have the problem that people don't even know what a scientist is. But yeah, anyway, Laura has another question.
I know a lot of students, maybe at undergrad age, who are very skeptical of using Twitter for career and science. But I think one of the most interesting things that I've gotten out of Twitter, and that other people in the general public that I know have gotten out of Twitter recently, is the humanization of scientists, like fieldwork fails and things like that. And I'd love to hear your comments on that.
Anyone who wants to go first?
I'll kick off. Yes, absolutely. The time that I got stuck around the backside of an island and had to get rescued by a boat. The time that I fell into the South Atlantic Ocean trying to jump onto a penguin colony. I mean, these are all horrendously embarrassing stories. But yeah, it absolutely drives it home and makes it personal. The number of times I've cried in the field because I've been so frustrated. The number of times I've thought about giving up. My very first field season, I was taking blood samples from terns, and the first time I watched someone do it, I thought I was going to be sick, and I said, I genuinely don't know if I can continue with this as a career. I had no other frame of reference. I had no one else I could talk to, and I think seeing that and making science, just laying bare the process that we all go through, I think, yeah, humanizes it and makes it, everyone goes through the same thing. It's less isolating to know that everyone else goes through these stages at some point or another.
So yeah, I completely agree. And I think the other thing for anyone who may be skeptical about using something like Twitter is I have had many genuine scientific connections that were like because of Twitter. There's a ton of people that I've literally like met in real life, and I was like, oh my God, like now I know who you are because I met you on Twitter, which is, it's kind of weird, but at the same time, it's amazing. And the other thing that I love about it is it democratizes science. Like someone can reach out to me and ask me a question and I can respond. That doesn't happen without a platform like Twitter, right? Like when I was an undergrad way back in the day, you know, you had to like meet your advisor or meet your professor or whatever physically, you know, in the same place. You had to catch them, right, where they were physically. Twitter allows you to not have to do that. Like I can literally, like Alex and I could have a conversation at any time while we're both on Twitter and you know, ask questions, solve problems, pose new ideas to each other, right? I mean, it's just a remarkable tool, I think. I will say that probably where some of the skepticism comes in has to do with time management, which I believe is a very good thing to consider. Like there's been lots of days where I have like spent way too much time on Twitter, and I will definitely admit that. So there's, I think, probably a little bit of time management issues there, but I think that, at least for me, being on Twitter has really opened up a lot of new ideas and introduced me to a lot of people that I wouldn't have had access to if it weren't for Twitter.
And just to chime in on that as well, I mean, I've had, you know, collaborations, you know, people that I've ended up co-supervising graduate students with, graduate students themselves. You know, it's because you have that sort of existing relationship to a certain degree. It makes the connections much more obvious as opposed to someone who just writes you out of the blue. And yes, absolutely, time management in everything is crucial. So what I realized very quickly was that I can't keep track of everything. So my solution was to create 2 private lists. So one of people that, you know, I genuinely want to see just about everything that they're saying, and one for, you know, I get home at the end of the day and I just want to have a quick scroll through of something while I'm making dinner. That's not the full onslaught of, you know, the mad rush of all of Twitter right in your face. And that's really helped, you know, me to prioritize, well, not prioritize, but to better manage how I interact with it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Well, the time management, yeah, aren't we all kind of guilty of that? I just wonder, like, if we weren't spending it on Twitter, we would spend it somewhere else, because I don't know, these things just happen. But what I find really interesting is how you kind of like already led into like how important it is also from an academic perspective, like not necessarily academia, but like basically all kinds of like research related positions. So I'm just really, really, really curious if you could just outline why you think it's actually important to engage in not necessarily Twitter, but also other kind of like science communication, and how important it is nowadays for actually getting a position, whatever kind of position that may be. That could go to Alex first for a change. Yay!
Yeah. So so full disclaimer, I've never worked in academia. I've only all of my research has been done outside of the ivory tower. So in government, in NGOs, and now at a museum. And each of those has had very different science communication requirements. So in government, it's much more internally focused, at least at the level of where I was working. At an NGO, you're doing a lot of engagement with members of that organization, with other groups and divisions within that organization. So it became, you know, much more important. And at a museum, so at the Natural History Museum, we have quite literally millions of visitors a year coming through our doors, tens of thousands every day. And the science that we have on display is, you know, science communication in its original form. You're presenting information to a group of people. And more, we need to better integrate that. We need to integrate that online. So, you know, just recently today, somebody tweeted a photo of a bird that had hit a window and had died. So I was able to write to them and say, hey, it'd be great if we could get that specimen in the museum. And they wrote back and said, oh, unfortunately, I've done something, you know, I've disposed of it already, but I'll remember you next time. And it's just, I mean, that's the connection. And all it takes is that one little spark of a connection. And next time they find a dead bird, hopefully, then they'll get in touch. So it's about, you know, for us, it's about promoting the museum and the collections and its use. It's not just a dusty old vault where we whittle away on taxonomy. It's an active living collection that's used to solve modern conservation problems. And for me, I think for us, science communication using Twitter is a key pillar to fulfilling that mission.
Yeah, so kind of being the exact opposite, I think I've only ever been in academia. I did work for a forest inventory company for like 9 months or something, but other than that, I've basically always been in academia. And I will say that, again, it's the connections that being on Twitter and doing science communication really can get you. And I think there's a little bit of an apprehension, I think, among scientists for this notion of like self-promotion, which you do on Twitter. I mean, let's just be honest. Like if I tweet out my Idea City talk, like I want you to know that I gave a talk at Idea City. But on the other hand, that now people know that I gave a talk at Idea City, right? Like, so I think people, and this is speaking for me, like I had to get comfortable with this notion that I'm kind of doing a little bit of shameless self-promotion, but on the other hand, then people know what you're doing, right? If I'm just sitting here and not telling anybody, well, then nobody knows what I'm doing. And so if Mike Pesca at the Gist wants to know about this new penguin paper that came out that has nothing to do with me, he knows to come to me because I tweet about penguins all the time, right? So I think it's a little bit of getting yourself out there, and if that's something to forward your career, to let people know what you're doing and why it's interesting and how your science is important, having a platform like Twitter, having the ability to talk about what you do in a way that is fun and engaging will, I would argue, probably help your career more than anything.
And just to follow up on that, just really quickly, sorry, Saskia. In a lot of grant applications now, certainly in the UK, you're required to talk about how you're planning to disseminate your results. And so, we're just wrapping up a massive 2-year grant on northern rockhopper penguins, and a big part of what we did was blogs and social media. It can't be, for that to succeed, it can't just be sort of occasional tweeting out. I mean, it can't be an afterthought if it's going to be successful, I think is the takeaway message. But that's part of a grant, which is one of the many facets that hiring committees will look for when looking to recruit someone in a research-based position in a university or elsewhere.
Yeah, both of you have mentioned a little bit about making connections with other people, whether that be for career or academia or some sort of project. But something else that I've enjoyed is the sort of support system of Twitter, scientific Twitter. I remember someone tweeted recently, #BadDayOrBadScientist. And we all rallied together like, it's just a bad day. You're doing great. Don't worry what R is doing. And so that kind of connection with each other and promotion of each other also, I think, is something really great that is sort of outside of science communication, but definitely something that Twitter has brought to me. And whether those connections lead to something in the future with career or projects or something, you're kind of getting to know people, even though you've never really met them before. So I think that's really great.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it's just nice that when you're going through a difficult time, and I mean, scientific careers do come with difficult times, a lot of them. It's just nice to see that other people basically do have the same kind of problems. I think it's really interesting what Michelle said earlier about like self-promotion. It's weird how this sometimes goes down really badly nowadays. Sometimes even a lot of senior scientists say like, why do you spend so much time on Twitter? Is it all just about like showing off rather than actually doing proper research? But then I disagree. I think this is all about increasing the impact of your science. And I'm not talking about impact factors here of publications. I'm not even going there at this stage. It's just about if you're doing work, you want to make sure it reaches people. It goes where it needs to go. And if you don't engage in some sort of science communication, it's quite hard to make that happen. So yeah, I don't think that self-promotion is a bad thing. And it's not only about promoting yourself, it's also about promoting the species you're working on. Penguins, I mean, seriously, what you've done already for all the emperors and kind of like all the attention you brought to them, that's quite impressive, Michelle. And yeah, I wish I could do the same thing. And I think it would be really good to do that also for other species. And yeah, it's just hard to do that in a different kind of way. And Twitter is just a very effective method of doing so. So yeah, I think we kind of like touched on quite a few options already. There is one more question that we got from external people, and it's probably something that goes to Alex because he has a little bit more experience with this, but this is in relation to crowdfunding. So it's really interesting. As scientists, we're always kind of thinking about like who's going to fund our research, who's actually going to pay us for what we're going to do. And one really good new way of getting money in are crowdfunding places like Patreon. I think they're just CrowdFox is another one. So there are definitely a lot of different platforms. And yeah, can you tell me something about that, Alex, and how that kind of relates to science communication?
So I mean, full disclaimer, I've not used these platforms before myself, but there's been a couple of research papers that have come out on them, and it's not easy money is the take-home message. It requires a lot of work. So the idea that it can be a relatively quick way to get a couple of $1,000s to do a small research project really is a bit of a misnomer. So so the work that has been done on these is looked at sort of across, not just for science, but in general. And the success depends on a couple of things. One is simply the number of followers that you have on Twitter. Which is a metric of varying. Lots of things influence that, and also it depends how much you actually go out and promote it. So it can take a lot of time and effort, and in some cases, you may decide that might not be worth the time and effort for you to put into it. So I think it's something to be certainly explored. But it's not necessarily the quick and easy fix that some people might think it could be.
Yeah, and I also don't have a whole lot of experience with crowdfunding things, but I do have experience with crowdsourcing my science, which isn't a seabird project, but it is in the Antarctic. And I am fairly confident that if I didn't have the platform that it took me 4 years to get 11,000 followers, if I didn't have that number of people following me, so that people endlessly are hearing about like, please help me come and count seals on Tomnod. If I didn't have that, if I was just like brand new to Twitter and this was just a brand new thing that I was doing, I am very, very confident that the work that we're able to do would not be able to get done. We would have to use somebody else's platform or tie in with a bigger organization to get the message out. You really do have to have, you have a megaphone. Some people's megaphones are a lot bigger than others. So it certainly does take a lot of effort to get to that point. And so I think, I know when I was first starting out on Twitter, it was one of those like, is this worth the time and effort to try to get to that point, right? And I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea how long that was going to take and how much effort that would be. So I think there is kind of that question out there, like you can certainly get people interested, but if you don't already have that, a group of people who is following you and interested in what you're doing, it is difficult to get your message out, whether if it's for funding or for, crowdsourcing science like I have. So yeah, it can be kind of tough. I agree.
Yeah, so this was just an external question from one of the people on Twitter. So I just wanted to mention that. I think there's probably a lot of potential in crowdfunding, but it's probably better for smaller projects because, as Alex said, it's quite hard to get a lot of money done with it. But yeah, it's an exciting resource. So I guess we are slowly coming to the end, unless someone wants to say something. I don't really want to cut anyone off. I know that Laura wants to say a couple more things. And we do actually have a question, and the question is from Pat, who who is the World Seabird Union chair. So he's asking Laura, which I find quite exciting, what she learned during her position as the chair of the World Seabird Twitter conference, and how that resonated in her leadership skills, etc. So yeah, Laura.
That's quite a question, isn't it? I think that both of you have touched on this, is that you have to find what people are passionate about. And if the payoff is a great conference where people can share their work with cool gifts in Spanish, French, and English, then people are willing to put in the time, and connecting with people, making sure that people feel valued. I think that follows with this, and then, all kinds of other work, especially field work when you're in kind of difficult conditions. And so I think that over the last 6 or so months, mostly what I've learned from this experience is that there's a lot of really cool people that are passionate about seabirds and that are really creative, and that all they need is just a little platform to kind of, like you said, like use the megaphone of the WSTC4 hashtag, and there we go. It's just the passion's already there.
I think this is a classical case of Laura underselling herself again. But anyway, yeah, no, that sounds really good. And I think Pat is quite happy with that answer, I hope. So yeah, huge thank you to Alex and Michelle for joining us here. In addition to already their most amazing plenaries ever. So if you haven't seen or read their plenary presentations yet, you might want to go back and check up on them. Yeah, so this is a bit of a cheesy bit, but I actually really liked it, and I would really like to actually close this kind of like conversation with a quote from Michelle from her presentation, which says, "SciComm is a tool for your research." So this sounds like such a simple thing to say, but I think it's actually super important, because a lot of people just completely don't see it as a tool for research, but it definitely is. And I hope the conversation we had over the last 20 minutes, 25 minutes, kind of like made that clear. It is really a tool for research. Okay, now up to Laura and finishing off.
Okay, I don't know if this is another case of classic underselling, but I want to say a huge thank you to every single person who volunteered, every person who translated and proofread emails, every person who responded to my 1 a.m. Slack panics, everyone who chaired the sessions. I thought the chairing was fantastic. There was lots of great introductions and banter and funny gifts, and I think it really made all the presenters feel even more excited to kind of put their work out there. So just massive thank you to everyone, to each of our sponsors, and especially to the plenaries, because that was super cool and it got a lot of engagement. And I think that people who are maybe new to SciComm and new to Twitter, seeing something like that is really huge for them. So thank you.
And I just want to say thank you to you and everyone as an organizer, because as a presenter at any conference, if it's a Twitter conference, if it's an in-person conference, being a plenary is kind of stressful and things. And I felt like I was like cloaked in a nest, as it were, of like safety, and like, here you go, that things are like all taken care of, and I never had any questions. And so it was a really wonderful experience. So I just want to congratulate you on doing a wonderful job. It was really, really well put together.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, that was kind of the goal. The goal was to make it as easy as possible for everyone to participate. So you need someone to help you translate Spanish, we got someone on it. You need to have questions about the hashtags, we got somebody for that. And just kind of a lot of, like you said, a lot of buffer for everyone kind of a lot of sources you can get information from, but direct information in a good communicated way.
Yay! Okay, so that's everyone being happy and cheering. You. Yeah. Okay. I guess we can slowly come to a conclusion. From my side, I would just really like to thank, because I didn't say that enough, I think, Laura, for like volunteering to be a chair, because I think for some people this is not clear, but this whole conference is volunteer based. So no one gets paid. There's no allocation of time to this. Like everyone allocates their private time and their hobby time to it. So it's a huge responsibility to actually take on the chair position, because that's the one, like you're reliable and you're responsible for things going well or things going not so well. So yeah, huge thank you to Laura for doing that. Huge thank you to the rest of the committee as well. And there is one more thing that I wanted to point out. So this sounds already like huge closing. It is. So this is going to be one of the last parts of the Twitter conference. In 5 minutes, there's going to be Pat, the chair of the World Seabird Union, giving us a couple of tweets and officially closing the conference. But we wouldn't be the Twitter conference if we didn't have anything else lined up. And as you know, it's an annual conference. So World Seabird Twitter Conference number 5 is coming up next year. So we already have our chair. So it's going to be, yay! It's going to be Agnes. She will be all over Twitter within the next couple of weeks. And we are already looking for a committee, so people that want to get engaged with organizing the conference next year. So please give us a shout if you actually want to be in the committee. It's a really, really rewarding process, and it's a lot of work, but it kind of spreads out evenly and nicely between people, and it's a good experience. So yeah, everyone kind of holds each other's back, so it's quite nice. And obviously, really important, don't forget the winners. So we will announce the winners of this year's conference within the next couple of weeks. So stay excited. And yeah, I hope I might see one of you then at the Seabird Group conference. Yay! So yeah, stay around. And yeah, that's the end of the podcast. See you. Bye-bye.